What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Ryan Tillman Show. Thank you guys, first and foremost, for all your support. And recently, we had my big campaign kickoff for governor of California, which was amazing. So for all you guys that showed up and came out, it was an awesome experience, but I can't thank you guys enough. We got so many donations from that event, and we also got so much momentum taking us into the future. Now, let's talk about today. Today, we're going to be diving into a topic that cuts across the headlines, politics, and even some of our personal stories. We're talking about immigration, folks. But we're not just going to talk about immigration as a political issue. We're talking about it as a human issue. Because if we want safer, stronger, and a more united California, we need to have honest conversations, one that lead with truth, compassion, and clarity. So this conversation matters today, so make sure you share it with everybody. Recently, I spoke with an ICE agent, someone who's actually doing the work and not just tweeting opinions. And what he shared with me really changed how I understood what's happening on the ground. Let me tell you, it's messy, it's inconsistent, it's confusing for the agents, for the people, and honestly, for most of us. So today we need to clear the fog. And part of clearing the fog means educating people on what is actually taking place to become a U.S. citizen. Because let me tell you, a lot of folks throw around the phrase, get in line and do it the right way. And without understanding how hard and confusing that line actually is, it can make it difficult to understand the process. Here's a quick breakdown that I did just for you to understand the process to become a U.S. citizen. You see, you first have to be a legal permanent resident. That means that you have to have a green card for at least 5 years. And it's 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. You must also live in the U.S. consistently and meet physical present requirements. That means that you have to be present here for at least 30 months out of the last 5 years. You also need to show good moral character and a clean criminal record. So all that stuff, for the most part, seems pretty easy. But here's where it can get a little bit more difficult for someone who is not a U.S. resident. You must be able to read, write, and speak basic English and actually pass a civics test on U.S. history and government. Now imagine going to another country like, Russia or Germany, Iran, wherever it may be, and having to get fluent with the language in order to be a citizen there. That's not an easy task. You also have to fill out a long application, which is called the N-400 form. You also have to go through a biometric fingerprinting process, attend an interview, and then, and only then, you'll be approved. And then you also have to lastly take the oath of allegiance. You see, this whole process can take anywhere between 6 to 8 months or even longer, depending on the case. And it costs around $725 just to apply. So now when I hear people say, just become a citizen, I have to actually now pause myself. It's not that easy. It's not as easy as it sounds. It takes time, it takes resource, patience, and in many cases, courage, especially if you're someone who's already living in some fear. So now let's talk about the inside of ICE and what's going on. Here's the real story. Let me be clear, this isn't about blaming one administration or another. Immigration enforcement has evolved tremendously under multiple presidents, and each change has come with its own set of challenges and inconsistencies, if you ask me. So what I learned in speaking with the ICE agent is that, look, historically, ICE has prioritized undocumented serious crimes, people who actually pose a direct threat to public safety. But over the years, enforcement strategies have become way more reactive. Policy shifts from leadership at the top, regardless of party, have left a lot of ICE agents unclear on direction as to where they're going to go. Some offices still focus on original mission, which is targeting those specific violent crimes and violent offenders, while others have actually broadened their scope and say, you know what, we're going to go after those that are undocumented, regardless of whether or not they committed a crime. So as you can imagine, it's even created a divide within the agency of ICE. And it's not because the agents are acting maliciously, it's because the system actually lacks a unified front. So let me ask you this. Would you want your job responsibilities changing every few months based on who your boss is at the time? Would you trust that type of system? That's the reality of what's going on right now, and that's the reality that many of these ICE agents are living in. And that they're also the people that are caught in the middle. as well as some of our immigrant families, entire communities, and some of these other law enforcement agencies, local agencies. All of us are caught in the middle while we're watching the bureaucratic argument above us. You see, ICE, what I've realized, has a messaging problem. Here's something that's not talked about enough, if you ask me. ICE has completely failed to educate the public on who they are, what they do, and why they do it. And this actually feels quite familiar to me because it's the same thing that was true of police departments for decades. When I first became a police officer, one of the biggest issues I saw between law enforcement and the community was a lack of transparency. People didn't understand our mission. They didn't see the human side. All they saw was the uniform and the headlines. And that's exactly why I started Breaking Barriers United. Show the human side of the policing. Tell the why behind the badge and what we do and have real conversations. I knew that we could change the relationship between law enforcement and the communities we serve. And that's exactly what I did, and that's exactly what we did as a team. We started seeing real progress and we started seeing less fear, more trust, and more accountability. So let's just imagine if ICE were to actually start doing that. Imagine if the public actually knew that many ICE agents are prioritizing dangerous offenders. Imagine if they saw the good work being done by agents who care about protecting people and not actually tearing families apart. But instead, ICE has stayed in the shadows. They've let the fear build, and they've actually let the worst headlines really define the whole agency as a whole. You know what? And that's honestly a leadership problem. So we have to talk about that, but we can't talk about that without actually educating you guys on what it actually means to have a sanctuary state as well. You see, we have to talk about California being a sanctuary state because a lot of people throw that term around without really knowing what it means. I didn't really know what it meant until I did some research. Being a sanctuary state doesn't necessarily mean that we ignore immigration law. What it does mean is that local law enforcement agencies don't actively assist with federal immigration enforcement. So for example, someone is arrested, they're undocumented, the local jails won't hold them longer just so ICE can come and pick them up, unless there's a serious criminal charge that's attached to it. Sounds like a noble intent, right? Protecting the families, ensuring communities feel safe to report crimes. But here was the unintended consequence that most people don't recognize. ICE now has to go and find people out in the public. And that's actually why we're seeing arrests at grocery stores, outside of schools, and even at graduations. You know, there's always a human side of me that wants to be empathetic. So I want you to imagine this for a second. Imagine as a graduate, you've worked your tail off with honors, your family is cheering you at graduation, and an ICE agent shows up just trying to do his job. Now, whether that person was a threat or not, that moment, what it does is it creates fear, not just for that family, but for everyone watching this unfold. That's not a good look for anyone, if you ask me. Now, I'm not saying that sanctuary laws are all bad, but what I am saying is we've created a system where federal and local law enforcement agencies are working against each other and not with each other. And who ultimately pays for that dysfunction? We, the people, are the ones that pay for that. So let's talk about what does real leadership look like. One of the biggest problems in the entire immigration debate isn't about policy, it's about the lack of leadership. When an ICE agent tells me that every office across the country is doing things their own way, that tells me that we got a system that's running on autopilot with no captain. And I don't care if you're a pro-Trump or anti-Trump or pro-Biden and anti-Biden, whoever else you want to throw in that category. This is not partisan. This is about people. We can't fix a broken system with broken leadership. Real leadership means we got to create clear enforcement priorities, giving law enforcement consistent guidelines across the board, and communicating transparently with the public. Here's what I'd also like to add. Leadership isn't just about strategy, it's about communication. Whether you're a cop, a politician, or an immigration agent, if you don't tell the public what you stand for, they will automatically start to assume the worst. That's why I say again, ICE doesn't just have policy issues. It has a PR issue. And until we start communicating better, we're going to keep creating fear where there should be understanding. I've got a dear friend, someone I love and respect, a hardworking man of faith, someone who contributes positively to his community. But he doesn't have all of his documentation in order just yet. He's been in the process and he's getting everything done the right way, but it's slow, it's complicated, and for some people, it's very expensive. And you know what? He's also scared. Every time he sees a headline about ICE at a school or someone getting picked up, he starts to ask himself the question, am I next? He's not out there committing the crimes. He's out there actually trying. He wants to follow the rules. But the system isn't necessarily set up to make it clear or fast. And I look at him and think, man, how many others are out there just like him? Good people stuck in limbo, trying to do it right and afraid that one wrong step could erase their entire life. So that's why I say, look, we need a system that makes room for effort, room for process, and room for redemption. Now, let me be clear. We do need to deport the criminals, the human traffickers, the sexual abusers, those that are out there committing lawless acts in our communities. I want to be absolutely clear. We must deport them. They have no business being here. But I also believe that we can fast track a legal status for those who are working hard and living clean. To put a reasonable deadline on that process, so if anyone or someone ignores that opportunity, we can clearly say, hey, look, deportation now becomes the consequence. We gave you opportunities, we gave you a time to do it, and you didn't get it done, so now you'll be deported. I believe that's fair, I believe it's firm, but I also believe it's human. So what role does the public and the media play in all of this? We got to be real about this. The media plays a huge role in shaping the fear created centered around immigration. You'll see a video of someone getting picked up by ICE, and immediately the comments are all, they're ripping families apart, we're turning into a police state, this is what fascism looks like. What I want you to do is I want you to slow down. Sometimes ICE is actually picking up the convicted felon. Other times, yes, there may be somebody who's being picked up without a criminal record. But the point is we need context, not just clicks. And as a public, we got to do better than just surface level opinions. Ask questions, do research, talk to people on both sides, be a critical thinker. Don't let fear or ideology replace the facts. And now in 2025, in this digital age we live in, that's ultimately what we see occurring more often than not. Do we want to be a state that leads with fear or one that leads with order and opportunity? Do we want to be a country that leaves no room for second chances or one that expects accountability but also leaves room for hope? And do we want agencies like ICE to keep operating in the dark, or are we finally ready to demand leadership that is as transparent as it is effective? You see, we can have strong laws and strong communities, but only if we're honest about where the system is failing and courageous enough to do something about it. So here's my final closing call to action for you. If you're listening to this and you've got a story, whether you're in law enforcement, an immigrant family, or just someone trying to understand, I'd love to hear from you. So send me a message, share this episode to all your friends. Let's have a conversation, because what's broken in our system won't get fixed from yelling online. It gets fixed when people like you and me step up into the messy middle and say, we can do things better. My friends, do me a favor, like this video, share this video, subscribe to our podcast. This is The Ryan Tillman Show, and until next time, stay strong, stay informed, stay human, and never stop breaking those barriers. God bless.